the Dunkin Dad. Everybody, welcome on board. Zach Brown Band Foundation Chicken Fried. Using that, we don't own the rights to it. We just love to share it and play it. And hope everyone out there is having a good day as we get ready for Phillies home playoff baseball action for the first time in 11 years here in the city of brotherly love. So, funny thing happened yesterday, right? Had an instance to hop in an Uber, take a ride, and my Uber driver, kind of one of those really friendly, familiar individuals, and you're just waiting for the conversation sort of to start. And I was kind of having a little rough moment, and it was just like, hey, what's going on, blah blah blah. And it started to evolve, started to talk, and the gentleman, Mr. Robbins, a great gentleman. He's 71, 72 years old. He's out there, little side hustle for him. He's retired, and great conversation. Black guy, African American guy, and we started talking about just life and the situation in Philadelphia and what was going on and kind of his perspective, and it sort of just it evolved into this really uh, amazing conversation for about 25 30 minutes because there was traffic coming back from Jersey or Philadelphia, and it was wonderful to have perspective from Mr. Robbins in so much that because of his age, he was a father, grandfather 7 times over as grandfather. He's 3 children, 4 children. His one son's a pastor. Going to reach out to them and have a bit of a conversation. Hopefully, one day, if he's available, if his son's available, maybe we'll bring them on the program to talk. Just because the perspective, right? A different perspective. Like uh, we all sit here sometimes, we armchair quarterback, like, what's the problem? What's going on? What's happening? Da, 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 da. And, right away I came out and told him, said, listen, said, I was raised, real conservative. I'm more like on the moderate side. I try to see both sides of every stories, but I can't really understand why, in today's day and age, we all as a whole, white, black, brown, purple, green, orange, rainbow, we all can't just, get on board and get together and like just get past some of uh, the BS that seems to be the simple things that always get everybody into the trouble. It sounds like these kids run around shooting stuff. People like all the Karens, people being holier than thou, people not really keeping themselves, in check and in perspective. And he was a Christian. I didn't ask his, denomination, but his specific denomination of Christianity or specific practice of Christianity. But he said three things that were like really profound. He said that we we all want the same happiness, right? We all want the same uh, contentment, in our life. We don't want to worry about walking outside and getting beat up and shot. He told me um, when he was coming up as a young man, he joined the Boys and Girls Club in Asbury Park, and it really helped shape him and mold him. And he had good mentors, and it put him on a path of keeping things in order and making the right decisions. And of course, we both share with one another. We both, had sinned and we both fell and we both made mistakes, and that's life. And you pick yourself up and you move on, and you don't pass the blame on to anyone else, and you take accountability and responsibility for your actions, and you try to be and continue to be this better person that's constantly evolving every single day. And as I sat there, I'm listening to this conversation. I'm like, wow, this is coming from a 72-year-old man who has my life lived twice over now. And what an amazing perspective to have, because a lot of times we don't want to have a lot of these conversations with people, especially people who don't look like us, don't sound like us, don't come from the same neighborhood, they aren't from the same religious background, economic background. And a lot of that fear is based on just the unknown. And people, as we are wired, are either very inquisitive of the unknown. They want to know, like discover. It's like the kids the other day I was talking about. Like kids inherently want to learn. Tell me about this, teach me this, show me this, let me figure it out, let me figure it out. And then the other side is just like, no, forget it. I want to hear about it. I want to learn about it. I'm happy in my own space. I'm going to just keep doing my same little thing, and I'm not going to, challenge and expand my views or my perspective. Both sides have credence. Both sides have validity. But the disservice that happens in not expanding one's horizon is that then you are conditioning yourself to a my way or the highway sort of mentality. And again, certain situations, particular instances, it works. You're able to survive, you're able to get by. People have gotten by being, ignorant about a lot of things for millennia. We are in an age now where we really don't have an excuse to not broaden our horizon. And as our conversation kept going, we both almost simultaneously came to the agreement that, well, that doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, but I'm still going to respect you and your decision and your background. And as long as it's not hurting me or demeaning me or uh, attacking my family, friends, community, etc., then I'm not your judge, jury, or executioner. So as we went down this road, and we kept going on this little um, as we went down this road, and we kept having this conversation about learning and growing and sharing and understanding. Um, the next thing that we sort of came to was that a lot of times when we are in the presence of other individuals, because of the influence of the entertainment and the media and, dare I say, the video games or the celebrities or the movies or just the social commentary, we are more receptive to that message, right? And when that message is like continuously repeated and beat into us and fed to us, we become desensitized to the way that we go about our daily life. And some of the things that we wouldn't justify, we begin to act out on, or we begin to do, or we begin to take part of. Um, Conversation evolved into, my question asking him, I said, well, then, what's your perspective on all these kids in these cities, like, just running out and shooting and getting into it with people? And he's like, he said, when you have a foundation that is not necessarily the best base to come out of. And he said, we can go into a whole other conversation about this, and I will with Ms. Robbins, that, there's definite design, and we both said it, there's definite design by the society and the powers that be. And we both kind of used that word and laughed. And that certain people are kept in certain places for certain things. And we know we've seen this in the constantly like the redistricting of like voting areas to sort of push numbers and push people through. And where I was able to see the conversation from Mr. Robbins' side was that even in communities outside of the ones that I grew up in, individuals see that there are other players at hand, sort of calling the shots and moving things. And there's instances where people want to speak up, people want to act out, people want to make change. And we talked about a lot of the players, specifically in the African American community, the Black community. And we talked about MLK, we talked about Jesse Jackson, we talked about Obama. And it was great because you were able to see that, maybe the voice wasn't being as received in the right way from the other side of the conversation. And just know that the message, the message. I'm not talking about the way that people go about things. We're not talking about the way that things need to be inflammatory and stuff like that. But when you want to be heard about something, and you've been more or less like kept to the sidelines, you do some crazy things to get attention. I mean, kids do it all the time inside your house. Rich kids who don't feel like they're getting love from their mom and dad, they go on benders and spend a lot of money and all this kind of shit. I mean, it doesn't only apply to specific areas. It's just the way that individuals are able to, you know, react and cope and deal with and address or not address um, these concerns. So we started, going more. He said, he was like, he had a conversation. He was talking about Columbus Day. And it's funny, we just talked about Columbus Day last week. And he was saying, we need to learn and keep our history. He said, erasing and getting rid of our history does a disservice to us for our growth. And I was like, I said, I 100% agree with you. I said, I think you're exactly right. I think like, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you want to paint a, beautiful, colorful rainbow picture for everyone. You need to acknowledge both, the goods and the bads in the situation, and then you need to move forward with it. That's not saying that you just erase it and rewrite it. I mean, obviously, if there's stuff that is proven to be the way that it was, well, then yeah, talk about it, say about it. But instead of focusing on, you know, all of the, the negatives, which what we tend to do as people, right? We tend to focus on the negative, and believe me, some negatives are extremely negative. They're extremely, evil and inherently evil by nature. Acknowledge it, understand that things took place, and instead of leaving the conversation there, where you're just waiting for someone to come by and get angry with it, why don't we then expand on the positives? Conversation continued on then to a the idea of a meal and how it plays a critical part in society as a whole, and how it used to hold a very special place amongst all cultures, and how that even now you see that the meal and the communal gathering, etc., is it's whittling away and it's not as present as it was. We spoke that we'd like to have a table where everyone can come to the table, everyone can bring their culture, everyone can bring their meal. You can pick and choose and exchange and celebrate and be, interrogative. Ask questions. Tell me why. What's the story? Give me the background. Give me the understanding. You know, make me understand why this is important to you. And using the meal as a metaphor. And and that doesn't mean you're going to like everything at the table. That doesn't mean you're going to eat everything at the table. It doesn't mean you're going to agree with everything you hear at the table. But as Mr. Robbins was saying, and as I so many times say, and as Rico will say, that you can all sit down and you can all be part of this community and you can all be accepting of one another. That doesn't mean you need to change by law and demand individuals to do specific things. Um, you when you start to overly break down and identify in that macro and micro identity, you actually begin to lose, who you are, what you're about, and where you came from. And like we talked last week, like you lose that pride, that good pride. You lose that ownership, and there was no minced words. There was a lot of talk about how uh, policies and things were put in place in order to, create this false sense of, things will be taken care of. Don't worry about it. Don't have to worry and question about this. Da 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 da. And we got back to eating and the idea of family. And you can have whatever you want in your dynamic of family. Like both of us were like, hey, this is your family, that's your family. But what was echoed between both of us was that it starts very early on with individuals and with children where we lay that foundation. We lay the groundwork for, you know, being a good person, being a good steward of the earth, being respectful to those around you, understanding that you haven't walked, a day in their shoes, and you haven't necessarily earned what they have put the time in and earned. Um, we talked about how when you look at a lot of other uh, organizations, doctors, firefighters, military, police, a lot of service, you know, you have this wonderful arrangement and concert of individuals from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of backgrounds, with all sort of different personal opinions working towards a similar goal. And that every time there has been some inroads made to where people are kind of like, you know what, enough of this over here. Let's actually get together and do something to really make a difference. In society, there's always something that comes up as a hurdle. And from his 70 plus years perspective, you know, he would say, that's by design. There's a reason why they don't want everybody together and on the same page. And we didn't agree about everything. And we could tell, like, I told him, I said, to be honest with you, I was raised, Catholic and conservative. When Obama came around, so I didn't vote for, Obama. I voted for the other guy. Um, but what I took away from Obama, and I said, I'm not going to speak on his foreign policy. I'm not going to speak on, his relations and stuff like that. I said, but as a whole, and just as a person who appreciates people and community in general, I felt like it was an opportunity where the ball was dropped. Like somebody dropped the ball, and he was like, "That's it." He said, "You're exactly right. That's exactly what happened." He was like, he said, if you told me when I was a kid, back in the 50s, that we were going to have, a black president of the United States, he said, I would have asked you, what are you smoking? What are you drinking? Can I have some? Because that would never happen, in my lifetime. And he went on to expand the fact that, like, when you saw the election night and you saw the resoundingness, and he said, of course, people finally came out and, the voting reflected, all of these years of, pent up, emotion and anger and frustration and, the real the real idea of like an inequality in the sense that the idea of being actually feasible and attainable was almost a not a pipe dream, but more or less like, man, that's never going to happen. Like, people are going to keep everybody in their place, etc., etc. And he said that it's unfortunate because in both situations, he said, even in this great moment, he said you had people on both sides, which is, you listen, right there. There's people on both sides that, they came out of the woodwork. People that have been hiding behind this idea that nothing could be attainable were finally like, hey, one of our people have finally made it, so I'm going to be loud and proud and scream and etc. etc. He said, and there's always the wantonness to hear people's voices and hear people's opinions and hear their experience and share their experience and share the conversation. But you got the opposite too, where you have individuals who, they might have towed the line. They weren't really speaking out. They would say, "Oh, I'm in favor of this. That's okay. It's a free country." Da, da, da. And then you have this conglomerate that's just like, completely anti idea of, oh my God, there's a black president. Where I'm going with the conversation is that even to today, you have this idea of what is good, what is actually taking place, and what do we actually see as a society whole of like the results that we're living with, and we were both about there and on the same page saying that, people are fed up with the politics side of this country. And when you have these extremes, there's a lot more risk, than reward. Um, when we talked about why do you think things are evolved the way they are and why things have, instead of progressing, why have they, regressed, and why have they, maintained this sort of this volley of getting your view out, expressing um, your frustrations, and he was able to share with me that, you know the same way that you don't raid the capital, and you don't, have that whole incident on January 6th, which he then said, you know, just take for a minute, had that been, you know, any other majority skin color going towards the Capitol, what do you think would have happened? And I said, well, I said, past experience and past history of actions like that in the states, we know what would happen. We would have had a huge blow up. People were fine with other things that happened. They said, but that's sort of like it's hallowed and sacred ground, etc. He was like, right. He said, that's because that's unfortunately, he said that's a very plausible, reaction in that instance. I was like, I know, right? And I said that's stuff that we need to like, switch up and work on and get better with, expressing what you're trying to do. And the whole idea was like, listen, we feel the people over here on this side that something was kind of up with this election. Let's figure this out. Let's straighten it out. If it comes out that you lose, you lost. If you win, you win. But bottom line is, it's the last little sacred thing that we have in this country to have our voice heard. And even though these people don't necessarily listen to you, I was like, okay, all right. So then I asked him, I said, okay, well, you know, what about the whole Black Lives Matter thing? And burning down the cities and stuff like that, and burning down, the stuff with the riots, whatever. And he was like, he said, the lengths at which they went to, he said, were not a productive response. However, and coming from his perspective, which is what we want to always get to, he says, I can see, not justify it, but I can see and understand that being the action of all of that frustration that had been pent up. And I said, well, yeah. I said, I can, now I can understand this perspective. Still don't justify it. I mean, I don't think you should, to make a point. burn down the very businesses and institutions and buildings that sustain the neighborhoods. But you know having that perspective, seeing where all of this uh, pent up emotion, had been coming from. It's like, yeah, it's not right. It's not, just. I said, but is it a on the spectrum of what is feasible? Yeah, it's feasible. I mean, don't champion it, don't support it, don't like it. Um, but is it something that follows along the pattern with which has been set up in order to keep specific communities in their place? Yeah. Now we talked about opportunity. We talked. I said, well, then okay. I said, well, I said, but you have a black president. So like there's opportunity to move on and go. And he said that's the key. He said that's the key. He said, you may have bigger hurdles. He said, but you're you're wanting us to be a good person and working hard. And he says, life is always going to come in. Life is always going to interject itself. There's never going to be a point where you're going through stuff where life doesn't say, hey, how are you going to react? He said, but you know, the issue that he was seeing specifically with, the violence amongst the youth is that, and it was kind of, it felt good, guilty of, a lot of times what I bring up that, there's no direction, right? There's no direction. And the direction that is being given to the youth, and this is unilateral. This is, kids in the burbs, kids in the hood, kids in the city, wherever, that you're not really have to be accountable to anything. And he said that starts back again at your house. And it starts with a meal. It starts with you sitting down, coming around, giving your problems, saying what's going on, what's happening, talking through things, being corrected for maybe things that we shouldn't be doing and being, applauded for things that we are doing. And he said that, really unpacking a lot about, there was a big change, he said, where people, like you were being helped to get past and out of, certain situations. And then that becomes uh, complacency and dependency. And he said people, are unfortunately they're receptive to that sort of existence. He said especially receptive to that sort of existence when there isn't an example, and a positive example being shown to them consistently. And we talk so many times about that being the change that we need. Of course we need to enforce laws. Of course we need to have, equal and fair legislation. Of course, you don't need to be locking people up for years over, dope. He's like, well, he's like all this, funny stuff that went on with, the higher ups and stuff like that in powers be. He's like, there's reasons why we don't know who was involved with that stuff. He's like, because they're the ones that are doing whatever. And I was like, yeah, and like it was this conversation where you had this, 40-some-year-old white dude riding around with a 17-year-old, black guy in a car, having a conversation, hashing it out. And the message after all of the, hey, let me understand your frustration. Give me some like real perspective. And it was really, like I said, it was really, really good because, Mr. Robbins was 72. I asked him, I said, hey, what about civil rights? What was that about? I said, man, that was amazing. He said, it was tough. And, he goes, there were so many people that are hanging on to so much stuff, post Civil War, and then because you finally had the voting, and then there's this, and so he said it was like this moment of like clarity. He said, but still, people, because of the messages that you get, they hang on to a lot of things, and there's a lot of people that in the chat, and so we all have this. No, I wasn't Miss Daisy. No, I wasn't Miss Daisy. No, no. Actually, like I said to him, I was like, I was so really so appreciative. And we finished our conversation with God. He was like, "Hey man, look, I got a son. He's a pastor." He goes, and he talks or whatever. And he asked me about this podcast. And I was like, yeah, I said, I talk about this stuff. I said, because like at the end of the day, I said, doesn't everybody just want to be like happy and, industriously content with what they're doing and be good for their family and enjoy the things in life and not have to worry about, walking outside and, getting beat up or getting shot or, somebody not giving, them the opportunity to like show that they can do the work, etc. And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, pretty much. He's like, yeah, pretty much. And he goes, it really is. And, his words, not mine. And he said, it really is a battle between, you know, good and evil. And you said, and when these kids act out, he said, that's just the actualization, the manifestation of all of this negative, evil, energy, thought, whatever, just being put out into existence. And I was like, I'm like, dude, you're 100% right. I said, because I was like, when you're told, and he was confirming. I said, yeah. I said, I could sit there and say, like, if I constantly tell you, like, you're entitled, you're entitled, you're entitled, you're entitled, you're entitled, then as the trust fund kid sitting in the Hamptons, I'm gonna be like, screw this. I don't. Nobody's gonna touch me. Nobody's gonna touch me. And I mean, we see that on both sides of like the bigger picture, right? Like Pelosi's husband got nothing, right? How many times do these athletes get into like horrific situations where like the standard everyday person will get smashed with it? They get nothing. Look at what happens over on this side with uh, kids and accounts, and it's like nothing happens. All right, and then you have this other group of individuals who are constantly being belittled, put down, undercut, da 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 da. It's 2022, right? I've got my views. I think things are better when it's a little more reserved. You exercise a little more caution. I understand the arguments over here. Incorporate good. I want to incorporate here. I don't think you should go to, Proud Boy extreme with stuff. Like anytime you've got extremes, you put yourself in a very peculiar situation. Sometimes it calls for it, right? Sometimes it calls for black and white, right? I mean, like when you're building a car, right? Or you're building a house. Like there's only so many things you can change before, like structurally and foundationally, you're not going to have a house or you're not going to have a car. Like you need certain parts, right? Okay, yeah, put the little tail fins on there. Put the little gizmos and Bluetooth things on there. That's cool. Whatever. No big deal. It's not changing the essence of what's being built or what's there. And as we were wrapping up our discussion, and he was telling me about his son who's a pastor, and we exchanged information. He was like, he said, this is a really good conversation. I said, I know. I said, I'm sure there's a lot of things that he'll have like not remember what he said to me and what I said to him and blah 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 blah. And being able to sit down and have the conversation to get past all of these like hurdles that we don't even know that they're put in to our lives and into our society. And it was cool because like you have somebody who is like a complete 180 from the way I was brought up. But not to a sense that he had Christian values, but like he was a black guy. He grew up through civil rights. He's a grandfather. Um, he, did like Boys and Girls Club. He had that whole existence of people, either supporting him or really, tearing him down for whatever reason. And you have the opposite, with me. And it's like, if I'm seeing stuff in my life and he's seeing stuff in his life, and we're beyond the point of, you know, bickering or pointing out, or, they have, I don't have, he has, I don't have, da 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 da. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. Something like bigger than you has been perpetuating this for the longest bits of time. And I'm not saying anybody's fucking conspiracy theorist, but we're both aware in two different generations that there's a design to the system that is inherently broken for a reason, right? It's inherently broken for a reason. So yeah, like you're gonna label and put blame and call out and yell at certain behavior, and you're gonna say entitlement or um, uh, like suburban suburb behavior versus urban behavior versus ghetto behavior versus whatever society. It's like we label it and we call it out and identify it. I don't want to be around that person. My God, he's so fucking lazy. Blah 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 blah. I don't want to be around that person. They're so damn entitled. They don't give two shits about what's going on. And it's like, wait a minute. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Like why? Like why can't we all just get together and figure some things out? Why can't we all get together and have a meal together? Doesn't mean we're all gonna agree. Doesn't mean we're all gonna walk away being best friends. Doesn't mean that we're all gonna, sit there and play kumbaya. But it does mean that we're gonna respect the other person. We're gonna respect the things that they've been through. In turn, they should respect the things that you've been through. And if you can get to that point, imagine the actual change that you could possibly, affect on the world. He even said something. He was like, he was talking about uh, coming up. He was talking about slavery and where things are now. And he's like, I was never a slave. He goes, he says that to me. He says, I understand the conversation. I understand the the fabrics that are woven in and why certain things are a hot button and why certain things are, important. He said, but I was never a slave. He said, I got up, I went to the Boys and Girls Club. He worked. He had a few things that he did, through his life. Raised a family, has children, has grandchildren, retired now. He was upset and frustrated that even though these hurdles, in some instances, in some places, are constantly reiterated and still there, is that, you know, it's like we had a black president. Like we went past that invisible finish line. Like we achieved like what is like the ultimate job, the ultimate thing, in the world. And he's like, if that didn't, wake really everyone up to get everyone sort of on the same page, he said, and it did the opposite, where you had a lot of people who came out of the woodwork, like we talked about before. He goes, we still have a lot of conversation, a lot of healing. I said, it's like we need a lot more meals, to sit down with one another. And as I was, going about that, started really doing my research with, because I have my understanding of a meal, he has his understanding of a meal. People will sit down and scarf sit down at the table by themselves. But coming from the Veneri Institute, says that the shared meal is an opportunity not only to eat but also to talk, create, and strengthen bonds of attachment and friendship, to teach and learn. And that's why it says, not surprisingly, the meal is often celebrated as supremely important, and a supreme component in community, family life, etc. And I think it's a great, great metaphor, because so many times all we do is we try to come together and it's bitch, 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 bitch. That's all fine and well. But like, when are we going to take the next step to some sort of solution? Right? I mean, the Outlaw posted something on her page about, sending her condolences to the officers and the five officers who lost their lives, condolences for the other departments, called for prayers for the three officers that were, shot here in Philadelphia, and she was like, this can't be perpetuated. This can't keep going on. This can't keep happening. We have to change things. Blah blah blah. And me, I replied back to her. I said, well, number one, I said, let the cops do their job. Like, let them do their job. Number two, prosecutor has got to do their job as well, he or she. And thirdly, the community as a whole has got to be like, enough with this bullshit. Like, enough with it. So unless you have all three working in concert, you could sit up there and throw messages all day. Put your little, fallen whatever flag thing in your profile picture, or wave this and donate to that. That doesn't matter. You need all these things working together in order for it to actually make some sort of change. And one isn't going to act independently from the other. And if you do have one that acts independently from the other, you're going to get this huge, huge disparaging scope of like results, right? Like, so you got all the cops that are walking around, they're busting heads and they're arresting everybody. Well, you're going to piss the community off because the community's like, yo, wait a minute. Like, this guy really was legitimately doing nothing. And now you're busting their balls. Like that Meyer with a highway, all or nothing kind of approach. And then you get the prosecutor who's just like, laissez-faire, like, I'm not gonna do shit. I don't care. I'm everybody's friend. I'm not holding anybody accountable. Blah 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 blah. And then the community are put in a spot where they're like, well, I don't want to speak up because bad people are going to be more aggressive towards me. Or if I do speak up and I'm friends with these guys over here, and there's no teeth from the judicial side of it, I'm not going to put myself in a bad spot. I get that. Like, I get that. Like, you don't want to be the person out there waving the flag, beating the drums, and nobody's got your back, right? And in this particular instance, you need everyone to have your back. But in order to get to the root of the issue, and he was saying, you see it in the music, you see it in the video games, and this seed of there being no sort of direction, good direction from an early age. These things begin to manifest in people, and then they act out and see it, and they act out and do it. It's like he brought the example of like Grand Theft Auto, right? He was like, he said, I'm just use that as an example. He was like, people see these video games and they play all day about, driving around and ripping people out of their car and shooting them, or shooting back the cops, or robbing people, or shooting people, in their businesses, and driving off into the sunset. And when something happens, boom, just hit the reset button, play it again, move up, play again. It's, they don't see the actual result and the consequences of their action. They think it's just a game. It's just, fun. I said, and when you aren't impressing upon individuals the idea that, the community and society sustains one another only when there is respect for everyone in the community, there's adherence to the laws, and when people are out of line or breaking the law or being evil, inherently evil, and doing evil things, that they're held accountable for their actions. Because that doesn't mean you can't give somebody a second chance. That doesn't mean that, you shouldn't allow someone to, okay, hey man, I messed up, did whatever I need to do, my restitution, my time, blah, blah, whatever it was, and move forward. Is it because people change? People do, move on. And he was like, and to continually to put people in that bad light, he says, you're continuing to do this disservice. Just now, granted, he says, like, if someone continues to do the same behavior, he was like, it's just kind of like your responsibility to address and correct that behavior, And I was like, man, I said, this is like, there's so many commonalities and so many points that were being made between the two of us that at the very fundamental level, people just want to be, again, industriously content and happy with their lives and their community, be around other individuals that fortify them and bring them up. When there's something that is wrong, they want to address it. And he's like, so many times we see places, when you see like hey, that person's house isn't necessarily being kept the best, or this person is neglecting this or not neglecting that. And he was like, he goes, a lot of times we don't know what people are going through. He said maybe someone got fired, maybe someone lost a job, maybe somebody's, you know, kid did something, maybe they got something going on in their life. And it was like, yeah, I was like, I can get on board with you. And he's like, that's where in the past, he said the community used to really come together. And instead of saying, what the hell is going on there? Let me call the township. Let me call the city. They would walk over and they'd be like, hey, man, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what's happening, but here's a hot dish for dinner. And I got some kids. We're just going to, touch up the yard for you. Have a good day. Like that sense of the community and really being there for your brothers and sisters, are like the little fundamental things that you have to do in order to move things ahead. Problem, and our next conversation, I hope, gets into this, is that like we've obviously, we've passed go, we haven't gone to jail, we are flying down, Baltic Avenue, head for the boardwalk at breakneck speed, and everything around us is coming down. What is going to be the solution to sort of right the ship? And we both kind of agreed, like, listen, this is a conversation that's going to take a lot of time. But the fact of the matter is that all of this activity might have been going on longer in certain areas, less in other areas, has now affected the society as a whole, where everyone is like, we've had enough of this behavior. We've had enough of these reactions. Our youth is our future, and coming very quickly, these individuals will be in a position of, authority and control. And you don't want it to be a repeat of the same story, just with different players. And I was like, yeah. I was like, you're, I said, 1,000,000,000%, on board with you. And he's like, well, he said, because I firmly believe that, people are put in individuals' lives for a reason. He's like, this is my information. Uh, you know, Reach out, give me a call, we'll talk. And I was just, I loved it, loved it, loved it. And I can't stop saying it, because having the hard conversations with yourself, having the hard conversations with people who aren't of the same background and upbringing with you, and hearing their experience and their perspective, it's like coming to the table and sharing a meal. I might not eat everything. I might not get nourished by everything that's being put there, but I'm going to respect it and I want to understand it. And after all of that stuff is done, the bottom line is, people, regardless of all that other outside stuff, they want to be happy, and they want people to be safe, and they want them to be around other individuals and places and things where they can enjoy this without the worry of the whole thing going to hell. Uncle Rico, how you doing, bud?
Oh, just living the dream.
Living the dream,
Just
baby.
living the dream.
Living the dream.
How you doing this week?
Good, man. I mean, I had like it was a little rough yesterday. I'm not gonna be honest, on the personal front, a little rough. But like I said, got the Uber from Jersey to get back over here to take care of some things, and met a gentleman, Mr. Robbins, and sort of one of those, like, we were, that conversation just started, and
Yeah.
it was awesome. And you know, I think, he was 72, black guy, completely honest with, everything. I was like, hey, this is who I am. This is who I, voted for. This is where I came. But, so I can't figure out, like, why can't everybody just get on the same page? And we had about a good 35-minute conversation, exchange information, whatnot. And he's like, this is good. He said, this is like what people need to do. People need to sit down and actually have these talks, instead of like, you're in this place and I'm in this place and I have this and you have that. He's like enough with that. Like, let's just sit down. Let's talk. Like, let's really, really unpack it. He said it's like it's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for you. But that's fine. He said they're actually doing something when it's uncomfortable. I was like, yeah, exactly, man. It's like this. It's like you're exactly right. I said because I can't feel, understand, empathize unless I have your perspective. You know what I mean? And it was great. It was a great conversation. I cannot wait to reach out and get in touch with him to have more conversation. And I'm really hoping that if there's an opportunity to speak with his son, who's my peer exactly, same age and everything, who's a pastor in, I would assume a black parish, black church, like yes, like this is what we should be doing. Like this is where we sow those seeds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not for like me right now. Like I said, planting the seed of the tree, I'll never get the shade on. It's like, but that's the thing. It's like if he can do something and I can do something, and it opens up one or two eyes, then it's like two become three, three become four, blah 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 blah. And it's like I don't know, man. It's like I believe people are inherently good. Maybe I'm a fool. I don't know. I know there's evil out there. I get it. Been there, done that, all kind of bullshit. But I really feel like, when you take away all of the other BS, people just want to really, I said, be happy and live their life.
Yeah. I have a differing opinion on the inherent nature of people.
Sure.
I think it's people's inherent nature to survive.
Oh, sure. That's part of it. Absolutely.
And they have to be taught either goodness or evil through
Hmm.
experiences.
Yeah. Means we
I
should
do think
survive.
there's an innate part of the human psychology where we get gratification from helping others and we understand what the difference is between right and wrong naturally. And
Hmm.
so in that aspect there is an inherent goodness in people, but I feel like survival of oneself trumps that
Oh,
on
sure.
all
Absolutely.
fronts.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, survival is, people will do it by any means necessary. They'll do it by manipulation. They'll do it by force. They'll do it by threat. They'll do it by coercion. People will do it by being, you know, smiley little good stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's people will find a way to survive, and I think the way that your environment, your past, your foundation is sort of set up, you have a disposition to be more aggressively fight as opposed to just amenable to things.
Fight
Like, and
versus
that's
flight.
yeah, fight versus flight. And I think that that definitely plays a part in the message that is either reiterated or disseminated to
Yeah.
the general people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's a, you know, people's level of contempt differs.
Sure.
So, what they're contempt with, we see billionaires that feel like they're in survival mode, and that's dangerous. When people in power positions, whether they're tied into certain organizations or they're being blackmailed or, for whatever reason, they're in survival mode and they just perpetuate this alarmist sort of survivalist mentality.
Hmm.
And, for example, Greta Thunberg.
Oh yes, Greta.
Now, we have delved into her. You have heard me openly talk about how she's a moron.
What are you
And
doing?
yeah, and the more I read into it, the sadder I realize her situation. Because here's this autistic girl with all sorts of mental illnesses, self proclaimed, mind you. This isn't up for debate. Like, she is autistic, she has mental issues. She famously said that her depression went away once she started to take action towards a climate change.
Hmm.
And she became this superstar overnight because of her ridiculous speech. that was nothing but, her being a kid and spitting out emotions, and
Right.
or a teenager, and fine, But the powers that be latched on. She won Time Magazine's Woman of the Year. Time Magazine Woman of the Year, Greta Thunberg. Like, at what point do we take a step back and go, this child is being used as a pawn for something else? Like, her handlers don't give a shit about her. She has all sorts of issues, and the only people around her want to use her to empower themselves and their movement and their global environmentalistic agenda. You see people like two idiot kids in London yesterday tried to dump tomato sauce all over a priceless Van Gogh painting. They actually did. Luckily, now they have protection
Right.
for these paintings because they know that now more than ever there's a threat against priceless art by environmentalists for whatever reason. Why they choose priceless art to get their message out, I don't know. They do get the exposure every time they do it,
Right.
but it's not the exposure they want. Like, people hate them. Like, they don't understand. Every time, like, I watched a video of a guy, like some of them sitting in roads in London, and people just coming out of their cars and just dragging them out of the streets. And oh my gosh, you're hurting him. It's like, what the do you expect to happen? Like, if no cops are going to remove these people are going to start taking stuff into their own hands because they're tired of it. Going back to your original point, people are tired of it. They're tired of the noise. They're tired of the divisiveness. They're tired of this loud portion of humanity that tends to take all of the space on the airwaves. And those of us who stay silent don't get the exposure naturally.
Mhm. No, I feel that so many times, and to really echo what Mr. Robbins was saying, is that like the the sculpting of the message, no matter what it is that's being perpetuated and regurgitated and sent down over and over, it's there for a reason. It's to keep you away from the real issue and what's going
Yeah,
on. And
like
we always throw up these little people, right? There's always da, 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 da. And meanwhile, on the
Kanye,
back, right,
Greta.
on the backside, you have individuals who are like really making strides in multifaceted arenas, education, healthcare, and they're like,
Thomas Massey, Kentucky.
yeah, it's like, yeah, screw that person. That's okay.
Yeah.
Let's not acknowledge them.
And people are so ignorant. Obviously, kids are stupid. We know this. Kids are dumb. They're easily influenced because they just don't have that maturity. Some adults, still the same. Like, the fact that this Greta girl could have become such an icon for climate change and environmentalism. Like, she doesn't even know where she stands on it. Like, she was previously speaking out against coal and nuclear power.
Hmm.
And now that Germany's in a complete collapse on their energy grid, they don't have enough energy for the winter. She's reversed course. It is now saying it's a bad idea to take nuclear energy offline. So all these documentaries and all of her speeches about how nuclear power is bad, she's an uneducated kid. And for adults to actually not only support but put weight into what she says and then try to sell that message as something worthwhile is insanity. Like, for a 16-year-old girl to dictate energy policy in Europe, who has no idea what energy policy is, A, she
Hmm.
doesn't understand how energy works, B, and she's 16-year-old with her own deficiencies. And we're starting to see this cyclone of, we saw it with purple participation
Mm-hmm.
awards, lowering the standard so everybody could be involved and inclusive. And now all of a sudden we're seeing the apologists for pedophiles and people with mental illnesses and handicaps running for office.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got that clown Fetterman in Pennsylvania who just did an interview
Mm-hmm.
with NBC. And NBC, to their credit, was honest. Usually they're very one sided. They would have protected this guy. But here we are. They actually did reporting. And what happened in the interview? The interviewee said he couldn't handle small talk. He was clearly not mentally capable. He had to have an auditory machine
Right.
read out the
Questions.
questions to him, and then it had a thinking AI give him the answers. Lord knows as if it's a guy in the back listening and typing it up. We don't know what kind of technology it is. It's not coming from his brain. We don't have that sort of technology yet. And even if that was the case, he would just say it. But he can't. And then you see all these people coming out on surprise, surprise. We all know what side it is, the left. And they start making excuses for this guy. Would you say the same thing to a Madison Cawthorn or somebody or a Tammy? I can't remember her name. God, who's in a wheelchair? It's like, how does a wheelchair and somebody with a mental handicap suffering from a stroke, hiding for 6 months, and then now running for re-election, we find out he's not good. He can't think. He can't speak. Like, at what point do we stop making excuses? Like, it's discrimination, as Brian Wagner put out. If he isn't able to run or if he loses, people are going to do what they normally do. You can't notice that he has a handicap. And then on the flip side, you have to notice that he has a handicap. And if you don't accept that and you don't push him through to make it more inclusive, you're a bigot. So either you're a bigot or you're a bigot.
I have long ago, but even more so in the last couple election cycles, you know, particularly since, you know, Trump spun it on everybody's head. Because I think that was, I feel like you even had individuals who were on, the Democratic side that were like, we're really fed up with the political red blue stuff. We just want someone to have our voice. So you know what? We're gonna split the difference, lesser of two evils, have this guy. And I think what happened in that instance is that a particular party in this country has learned that if I can get to you on one little issue that resonates with you, then you will ignore all of these other deficiencies that this person may possess, all of this other uh, underlying things that in the past you would have questioned, and you're gonna go for that guy. Like, I'll go for that girl. Like, I'm gonna latch the horse in the wagon to it, and I'm gonna ride that train and ride the horse, and that's my guy, that's my girl. And it's sad because we have always talked about, listen, like, you vote for the right person for the right job who's shown that they've done the right things, or they're proposing, solid ideas, and taking all this account. But when you go past a full presidential election cycle where the gentleman never even came out of his basement to debate, to even speak and give his views and opinions on issues that were really facing this country. I mean, that that scares me as a citizen, because that means that, you
Yeah.
know, like, I used to think I used to think that previous and prior administrations were the Manchurian candidate. I really think like Biden right now is more so of that than anything.
You
There,
mean
here's a picture. Stand up there. And it's like, don't say a word. Don't speak out. We got this
you
for you.
mean Tulsi Gabbard isn't the Russian cell that Clinton said she is?
Hey, there's so much, and that's the thing now. But people, because they have been put into this 15-second news cycle, 30-second news cycle, all they're really concerned about is what's popping up right now, what's popping up right now, what's popping up right now. And
No.
I said this. There's a young lady that I follow on Instagram, and she's been like canceled, censored, all this kind of stuff. But again, she takes whatever message is being put out, throws it up, and says, "Hear what they're saying? Hear what they said? See what they did?" And like then you see the exact opposite of what's actually going on. And she asked me, and she put a little questionnaire out to our people, and she's like, before this next cycle happens, blah 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 blah. What's going to happen for the midterms? Like, what do you think is coming? And I was like, sad to say, I said, there's going to be another Second Amendment kind of issue that keeps coming up. There's going to be another, shooting sort of thing. And what have we had? We've had cops getting shot. We got the guy in Raleigh shooting people again. Like somewhere, someplace, certain individuals and people, they are making sure that there is this humongous resonation of all of these issues that they're for prior to this election.
Yeah, but it's not going to work. They're toast. I mean, they're toast. You could have 25 school shootings across the country. They're not going to, nothing's going to change. That the Democrats are going to lose their seats. It's just, they've done so bad. I mean, Joe is the most senile, unable human to ever grace politics. And that goes back to the monarchs when there were dying kings on beds. Like they were more sane than this guy. They roll out a bag of bones. Like I just watched a video where he literally claimed that his son died in Iraq and won a Medal of Honor in reference to what happened in World War II. Like he is so far off. And we're gonna obviously have the wokesters be the loudest. They're always the loudest. But you are seeing people not only fight back, but they're fighting back in a different way by just not giving a fuck. Take J.K. Rowling's, for
Mm-hmm.
example. So she went under fire because she spoke out against trans. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't perpetuate it in her movies, and obviously the wokesters in that community or the supporters went apeshit and wanted her banned and take down Harry Potter and this and that and roasted her. And yeah, her recent adaptation of Fantastic Beasts wasn't as great. So this created this swell of, is she on the downfall? And they asked her after her unwoke comments how she feels, how does she sleep at night? And she said pretty easily, I read my royalty checks and it makes it a lot easier to sleep. And I was like, oh shit.
Damn.
Like, just like that. And she's like, no, I'm not going to apologize. I believe what I believe, and y'all can fuck off because I'm paid. All right.
And I feel, you know, I want to be
It,
sensitive. Yeah, like I want to be sensitive to everyone, right? I get this. But look at the example of Troy Aikman when he said, with the rough and the passers, and we got to take our dresses off and make the right call, and da 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 da. And to to his
yeah.
point, if you take that for its face value and its point, it's like yeah, we are becoming
soft.
soft. You know.
And it's by design, because here's J.K. Rowling's with her Fantastic Beasts franchise, and
Hmm.
she didn't play the woke card. I watched all the movies. There wasn't the subliminal messaging a la Disney with all kinds of transvestites, gays, whatever. They exist. People deal with it. But last night I watched Hocus Pocus 2. And
Oh
it's a good
yes,
and
yes.
it's a good movie.
Hmm.
But I also recognize that it's going to be Disneyfied. And for those of you in the audience who don't know what Disneyfied means, it means one, empowering women, two, empowering women of color or anything not white, three, unempowering men, four, professing the cult of LGBTQ 2S plus. That's the actual 2S LGBTQIA plus, the alphabet mafia.
Right.
And you get a scene or two with, somebody who's trans or somebody who's gay, whatever. They started placing throughout the whole film. I mean, every guy in the film was a bumbling idiot and white. Of course, the main character was a black female. Her sidekick was a frumpy Asian. And you had in one scene, very quick, a trans teacher dressed as a ladybug. And we all were like, was that a man? Because you thought it was a woman. And then he's like, the principal is ready to see you right now. And you're like, whoa, what the hell? Then you have these kids who are dressed up as the Sanderson sisters. And of course, one of them is your ultra flamboyant, hoping to transition little boy. It's never girls. It seems to always be boys transitioning to girls,
Hmm.
which is also very interesting. Then, okay, you're like, that was clever of them. I see where they're going. Let's see where they take this. Then they drop the bomb. A full on drag show. A drag show contest for Sanderson sister costumes, which the actual Sanderson sisters enter and lose to another drag show couple costume. And of course, you've got three loud, obnoxious, trans drags, whatever, drag queens that, whatever, they're going to do their speech and they're going to be them. I mean, at least they weren't doing splits and booty shaking and stuff like that. Like, there's costume shows like that, cool, whatever. And then very quickly, the sisters are flying around, and of course, they fly past a house with a gay couple, a black guy and an Asian Mexican looking guy. And I'm like, okay, so half the people in this town are trans, gay, or a combination of both. And I'm like it's so forced. Like they could have had just a costume contest
Hmm.
where there were people in drag. It didn't have to be a full on drag show per se. If they really wanted to make it inclusive, they could have made it inclusive to everybody, including cis women, females. But they didn't. The only cis females that were there were the Sanderson sisters. And you look at the way they perpetuate that narrative over and over and over. And somebody told me the movie was good, and for some stupid reason, I thought that they were going to overlook the fact that they Disneyfy it. And then within 5 minutes of the movie, I understood what was happening.
To get back to my conversation that I had with Mr. Robbins, you know, he expressed the fact that when you make your own personal choice and you make it with the full consciousness and full understanding that that's what you want to involve yourself in, whether it's, you know, LGBTQ, I2, whatever, hetero, cis, what, all that stuff. He said, I'm going to give you the respect for your decision, the same way that I want the respect for my decision and how I live. However, when you force the message upon an individual, that's where people have a problem. And I was like, yeah, you're exactly right. That's where people have a problem. And we both agreed again that there is definitely a movement in many arenas where you are being browbeat with a certain idea
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, hey, this is the menu. You want to be environmental, sound, and savvy. Yeah, go ahead. Put solar panels up if you want, recycle if you want, do what you want to do. Hey, if you don't want to do it, cool. But not forcing you into this predicament where by 2025, 2030, you're not going to have any other car except for an electric car. Or you have to include this in your particular medium, or you're going to be canceled or shut out. It's like your point. It's like, why did Disney feel it necessary to tell the story and tick off every single box? Why can't we just tell the story?
Because
Right?
that's who they are. And, I want to make it clear that I wasn't forced to watch the movie. So, in that aspect, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I they didn't force their narrative on me.
Right.
I know Disney is Disney's way. They're allowed to do that. It's
Sure.
up to me to watch it or not watch it. And it's
Right.
unfortunate
And
that, I have to take that grain of salt.
and I think
And so does everybody else.
yeah, and I think the grain of salt that everybody takes with the thing that people are beginning to become woke to is that there really is this message, no matter what the subject matter happens to be, that you are being backed into a corner to where you need to accept whatever the message is, or you're going to be canceled and ostracized or labeled as something else other than you are. It's like, oh, you don't want to be green? Oh, what's wrong with you? Do you hate the environment? Do you not want stuff for your children? I fucking want stuff for my children. I'm just not going to put solar panels on my roof and buy an electric car. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna recycle. I'm not gonna waste food. At the same time, it's like I'm not gonna get on my private jet and jet set across the world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, but the fact of the matter is that like this message, multifaceted message, is now it's not a hey, here's the information, digest it, formulate your own opinion, find out what's good, find out what's bad, see what resonates with you, make your own decision, have a good life. It's if you're not on board with this, well, these are the consequences for you. And it's going
Yeah.
so far as to be like, dude, they're tanking a fucking economy. They're tanking a country over it. They're purposely pissing off other major players in the world at your expense, not their expense. They don't give a shit. They don't care. It's not coming to their doorstep. And when it does, what happens? In 24 hours, everybody's rounded up on a ferry, off the island, on the mainland, sitting adjacent
Mm-hmm.
to Cape Cod in their own little resorts. Like, get the fuck away from us. And
Yeah.
and guess what? Knock on wood here. Martha's Vineyard and up that area, that is about as liberal white as you can possibly get.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, they've got their little American flags all for show. All for show. I mean, they're patriotic. They're patriotic because I'm an American and I like you're about as patriotic as yeah, I'm not even gonna say it. But it's like when it's brought to their doorstep, it's like, oh, it's a different story. Oh, this doesn't apply. No, no, no. Like, no, it does. You know, you're going to
Hmm.
make the bed. You're going to give us the message. Two-way street. Two-way street. But you're right, man. It's a this people are starting to see like, and believe me, one thing that if you are a student of history and you are a student of people and culture and iconography, big word today on the show. Symbolism and symbols are very, very big. There's a reason why the early Christians drew half a fish because it just looked like a little rainbow in the sand. Little line, nothing happening. But another Christian, when they come along, they complete it, make the fish. Oh, here's a Christian. I get it.
Yeah.
These are powerful things. And when you start to see these things over and over and over, and then you start to really look at what these things are, and it's like, why are those little swirly things all over Moana's little necklace? Why are those little swirly things on the eyes of the little alien in the home movie? Why is that little swirly thing? And then it's like, well, that's the FBI's marker for this, and this. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But it's little, 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 little things, you know?
Well, yeah, but little things grow into big things, and the over sexualization of kids is one of the issues that's happening right now. And the proof is in the pudding. To protect, they're doing it to groom these kids into being more sexually viable earlier. And with the apologists of minor attracted persons, let's get this straight.
Mhm.
It's pedophilia, okay? It's what it is. Did you know that there's 269 K through 12 educators who've been arrested on child sex crimes in the first 9 months of this year? 269. We haven't seen numbers like this since all the Catholic Church was unearthed with all their unholy bullshit.
Mhm.
And I'm a Catholic and I had to live through all that. That story personally touched my lives because one of the priests at my church became accused of it. And me and my friends knew him very well. And he never displayed any sort of behavior like that. Now, is that to say that it didn't happen? No, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is we knew that these crazy ass child sex rings were going on, and these stories out of Philadelphia with one of the Catholic churches, seminary schools, where they basically it was like a pool of
Mhm.
seminary kids that had to go and blow all these priests and do all sorts of weird shit. It's the same concept, but for some
Yep.
reason, these people have apologists for it. Minor attracted person, minor attracted people, and you can doll it up however you want. Oh, it's protecting people before they become pedophiles. Well, guess what? If you start defending them and saying it's okay,
Mhm.
you're only a minor attracted person.
Yep.
What do you think that person's going to do if they're not a pariah? If there's no negative stigma? Because the whole purpose of taking away the name pedophilia and adding minor attracted persons is to take away the stigma of being attracted to minor students, minor children,
Mhm.
minors.
Yep.
And when you see the amount of just educators, these are just educators.
Right.
These across all scales, men, women, gay, straight, they like boys, they like girls, they like handicapped. A lot of them take advantage of unfortunately, the mentally challenged ones because they're
Right.
sick fucks. And you see the over sexualization of kids when they're going to drag shows and watching a guy do the front splits and shake their ass in front of their face and then get a G string with a dollar bill stuffed in it by a 5-year old or by an 8-year old or a 7. Like, you were telling these kids that behavior is okay, A, and to be comfortable with it. If a guy wants to dress like a girl and shake their ass in front of you, you should celebrate that. And
Mhm.
then when they decide to get close, maybe they wrap their leg on your shoulder when they're doing that dance.
Yeah.
Don't if you shy away from that, you are the problem, not them.
But listen. I've been in situations where around it, caught up in stuff, and things get placed and used against you and against people and against situations, and you know there's very few times where individuals, and when you get the full story, you're like, hey, listen, so and so was trying to have a relationship with this person or that person, and that individual wasn't having it, or they were spiteful, or they were vindictive, and da 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 da. So I'm gonna be as evil as I can possibly be, and I'm gonna ruin their life the best way that I can, and shit like that happens. And
Brian
then
asked a great question. I don't mean to cut in.
mhm.
Do you think the parents that take their kids to drag shows cringe at the parents that still take their kids to Hooters?
Hmm.
I wonder. Same
I,
concept. Less
yeah,
sex.
yeah,
Just
I
because
think
they
that's
wear shorts, they wear scantily clad clothes and have great figures and are hot.
right. I mean, that's a great question, because having spent time south of the Mason Dixon line, Hooters was sort of like the rite of passage for a lot of the good old boys, going with their dad, going with their uh,
Oh yeah.
prepubescent, pubescent classmates, and oh, we're going over Hooters. We're gonna. And it's like I've been there, whatever. Talk about it, call it out like it is, and yeah, there's definitely the use and the sexualization of women in order to sell more beer and sell more wings and bring people in, and it does perpetuate that understanding and objectification of women.
Yeah.
Same
But it
breath,
makes me, yeah.
the same
Go
breath,
ahead.
like they'll flirt with you, and they'll shake their butt and they'll shake their boobs, make you stand up on the stool and dance and do the hula hoop and all that kind of stuff. Um, where I will,
And they'll make more money from it.
and they'll make a lot more money from it, a lot more, tons of money.
It's a business
It's
model. Like if you've
yeah, it
ever
is
been to
business model.
Scottsdale, you're
Oh
not
yeah,
gonna find a girl dressed up in full clothes at nightclubs. Okay?
yeah.
They're wearing thigh highs and panties and
Hmm.
bras essentially.
Yep.
That's you can call it whatever you want, but
I
it's
mean,
a bathing suit with fishnets
yeah, I mean,
and
we have it here. It's I think Brian knows it. It's a tilted kilt or something like that, and it's
yeah,
basically girls with
we have those.
the up shirts pulled in, the little tartan skirts, look like the little
Yeah, man
schoolgirls.
show. Ziggy
Yeah,
zaggy, ziggy zaggy. Oh, 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 same concept.
same concept. So sex sells. The the oh man, I can't like, and it's hmm, I'm not justifying Hooters, and I'm not defending the the drag the drag show. Both
Both
are
can
their own.
exist.
Both can exist, and both can have your own personal uh, interpretations of your
Yeah,
world. Where I would hold, and where I would put the onus on the parents that, listen, if you're going to Hooters, and yeah, you're going to oogle and blah 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 blah, you know, you would hope that you would sit there and say, you know, respect the young ladies, blah 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 blah. You admire whatnot. But like you said, the business model is just that. The business model is like, we want you to come in to look at this because it's going to lower your inhibitions. It's going to lower your reasoning, and you're going to be like, I guess I'll just get another pitcher of beer. I just need 50 more
yeah.
wings. Blah 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 blah. Wink wink wink. Where I have a problem on the other side of the ball is the message
They're
is
grooming a bad message.
right. The message is being um uh, like for a child who is still coming into an age of reason, for a child who is, trying to figure out, like, hey, does mommy like me? Does daddy like me? Do my sisters like me? Do I like me? What do I want to be when I grow up? Blah, 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 blah. And you go to the very core of the individual and you sit there and tell them, just change everything who you are to the full extreme of like augmenting your person. Like, you know, this isn't the lesser of the two evils over here at Hooters, but the Hooters girls aren't going in telling you, like, hey, little Sally, you're here with mom and dad. Why don't you go and get a breast implant and a Brazilian butt lift and be bulimic and, anorexic,
They're
and
not,
in 2 years come
they're not giving lap dances. They're not getting dollar bills stuffed in their G strings. Now, to the point that I have an issue with the grooming, it's the grooming of kids. So imagine a young man going there to
and
see his
time
dad
out
be a
I-
creep.
yeah, and time out for 1 second. I've been to both. I've been to plenty of drag shows. I've been to plenty of Hooters. I've been to plenty of Tilted Kills. So I've been there and I've done that. I've probably felt more welcomed in the drag arena because I was there supporting my friends and trying to understand and enjoy
Yeah.
a carefree environment. But those gentlemen and those ladies, even in the most cabaret-esque of shows, never crossed a line to where you felt uncomfortable or pressured. Conversely, there were plenty of times when I was in my 20s at Hooters where I had plenty of young ladies, flirting and hanging all over me because they knew, like, I'm not going to see this guy again. I'm not going to hang out with this guy again, but he might be friends with so and so. So I might get an extra $10, $15 tip. I might
Yeah.
bring him an extra beer.
Yeah.
I mean, it plays both ways, but the the to your point, I want you to finish your point.
Well, your point was a good one because, you know, it's point in case that not all drag shows are the same. Like I
No,
said at the beginning in the Hocus Pocus, they weren't doing splits and booty shaking,
right,
Like the drag shows that you've been to, you felt
right,
comfortable. You
sure,
weren't ostracized and
but
you weren't overly exploited for being a straight white male there.
and exactly, and to that point, at my age of reasoning, like, I knew what I was going into at the drag show. I knew what I was going into at Hooters. My
Exactly.
7 and 8-year-old child is
Doesn't.
unaware of that. So now
And
it's
that's the
my duty
point.
then as the parent to, like what Brian was saying, is that, like, hey, yeah, we're Hooters, ha 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 ha. I understand that. Hey, we're at the drag show, ha, I understand it. But like the minute that those players cross the line and they start to, like, you know, physically engage and influence and have a my way or the highway on my child or myself as a person, there's a moment like, I mean, wait a second here. Wait a second here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And people are allowed to do what they want with their kids. I have an issue
Sure.
with bringing kids into either establishment.
Sure.
Personally, if
Sure.
I had a kid and
Hmm.
uh, he wanted to go to Hooters, I'd be like, if you need to pay money to get attention from girls, you're doing it wrong.
Sure.
Period. It's the
Yep.
same at strip clubs. Like, I tip them money without getting dances because they're there to do a job, they're doing business, but it's not my thing. It's just never been. I don't like paying for attention. I've never had
Right.
to, never will need to, and whether that's arrogant or not, it's just the fact of the matter.
Right.
And some of them, more of them are there to make money,
Mm.
than have doting conversation with a random who's not trying to objectify them as a piece of meat, you
Yeah.
know? And parents are allowed to do what they want. Like, that's the beauty of freedom, and I wish that there was, I know they have like the drag show reading hour and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And you know, if parents want to partake in that, sign off on that, more power to them. You know, if they want their kids to be read I Am Jazz and get a completely jaded view of what her life has been, for those of you who don't know, I Am Jazz, a TLC show following a boy who fully transitioned to a female with all of the complications you can possibly imagine because she started taking hormones so early that his penis didn't grow properly. So she didn't have enough skin from his penis to make a vagina for him, her. And they had to do some gnarly surgery, which didn't work, split it open. She had all sorts of complications in and out of the hospital.
Mhm.
And to her admission, doesn't know what an orgasm is, doesn't have any feeling down there. It's just blank space. And she may never have that. Now, obviously, that's not going to be in a children's book, nor should it. But to give these kids this insane view of the situation, it's like the people that cry about Christopher Columbus in teaching about him finding the modern world, which I have a whole spiel on how Christopher Columbus is the most misrepresented character in our nation's history right now, because all the people that speak out against him and want Indigenous Peoples Day, look up Christopher Columbus and do your homework, because he was an Italian immigrant working for the Spanish while the Spanish were busy colonizing Italy and colonizing the New World. And he actually fought for the freedom of the indigenous peoples and cooperation, and was sent back to Spain in chains because he did not participate in the way they wanted. They actually committed a coup on him. So he was an oppressed Italian immigrant who later had his name tarnished because he was a second class citizen in his own country because the Spanish were ruling and colonizing Italy. So all the idiots out there who think that Christopher Columbus was this raper and pillager, wrong. Guess who came back with him after the first voyage? Native Americans. Guess what happened when he got back and saw his soldiers mistreating the indigenous people? He built jails for them, chained them up. They got in trouble. Now, his story is much broader than that, but to think that he started the slave trade and he started the whole uh, enslaving the indigenous people for profit,
Mhm.
wrong, not
Yeah,
him. If
and
anything,
I
we should
think
be upset at the Spanish and the Catholics, because keep in mind, this is during the Spanish Inquisition. If you don't
hey,
know what that is, look it up. As a
yep,
Catholic, I did my homework.
absolutely, and that's the thing that I always get back to is, you know, when we want to do the work and really figure out what's going on, and I touched on this a little bit. There is so much to unpack and to understand that unfortunately in your lifetime you will only be able to get maybe 3 or 4 sets of cliff notes on what has actually taken place. And this isn't justifying, affirming, damning, or demeaning any of these players throughout history. But yep, I'll see you in a second, bro.
All right.
Hope
Great
we
show. Love you.
see you in a second. Um, but it's a it's a multi-page, multi-chapter, multi-volume story, and we as people like to be cafeteria individuals. We like to pick and choose and see where things fit and we relate to and we identify. And challenging yourself to really digest all of these other things that are going on, that's a huge task. And I commend anybody who's going down that road and taking up that mantle because, you know, I can't do it alone. For me to have a full perspective, it's going to take everybody in the chat. It's going to take Mr. Robbins. It's going to take his son. It's going to take Uncle Rico. It's going to take my neighbors. It's going to take everybody coming to the table, bringing their meal, bringing their stories, bringing their experience, sharing it, trying to understand it across the board, not just one way. And maybe begin to change people. And we get back to the fact that we're all put here to be good and productive and really, it sounds cliche, but to be brothers and sisters, man, to get along with stuff, to enjoy this great freaking creation that we have. You're gonna like certain things I don't like, vice versa. I said last week about liking specific football teams and stuff like that. That's cool. That's fine. That's what makes it great. That's what makes it fun. But then it shouldn't take instances like 9/11 or a war for people to be like, hey, all that other shit doesn't matter. What really matters is community and society and survival and bettering ourselves as a people. Right? Like everybody's like, man, I really wish you could all go back to September 12th when everybody was like, fuck. Reality smacked everyone in the face. And people were more happy, more understanding. There's still idiots that took advantage of the situation. There's idiots down in Florida taking advantage of the situation. But when we don't want to correct those behaviors, when we don't want to address those behaviors, when we don't want to get to the root of these behaviors, you're never going to have any change. You're never going to be better. You're never going to move forward. And you just bitch and complain and live there until one or two things happen. You die or you move away. That's it. That's all that's going to happen. That's just the cycle of what goes on until everybody can finally be like, you know what? Take a breath. This is what I'm bringing to the table. Let's talk. What do we got? What do we got? You might get up from the table, walk away. Clear your head a second. But when you get up and clear your head to walk away, or when you get up to process it, don't you don't burn shit down. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. Brian says, I remember as a kid, elderly gentlemen arguing about politics at the barbershop, then saying to each other, hey, I'll see you at the VFW later, buddy. And it's like that's where I think like everybody really wants, like, you want to get there, but like you got to get past all the cliche stuff. You got to get past all the labels. You got to get past all the fact that, like, hey, work's going to be kind of tough and I'm not going to hear things that I like. And I'm going to have to really look at myself and size and look at themselves and blah, 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 blah. And later on tonight, 9:15, myself, John from Mayfair Play Action, Real Penguin AZ, following the Tony Bruno show 7 to 9. We're talking about shit like that. We talk about, the way that politicians, right now it happens to be Biden who's in office, right? It happens to be Krasner and Kenny in Philadelphia who are doing a shitty job. But there's plenty of politicians on the right side that I'm just like, are you serious? Like, are you actually listening and believing the words that you're speaking? Like, it makes no sense. Like, you have no connection to the reality of people that are over here. Now, it might make more sense. It might be more common sense to not burning a house down or blowing up the ship or, sink an entire economy or, changing wide sweeping policy and not like metering it and making sure you have enough on your backside to cover what you're doing. But those are things you got to talk about. Those are things that sustain your society and your community. You can only let the party go on for so long until somebody comes in and they flip the light switch. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's what we're getting to. Later tonight, I'll be on with those guys, 9:15, Tony Bruno, 7 to 9. Mark Smith, read the room with Uncle Rico, talking about yeast and policy stuff here in a minute. They probably already started the show. Also, check out AJ Johnson, his show Wednesday evenings. A lot of Major League Baseball playoff action. I love talking Major League Baseball playoffs with it. Phillies later on today. First game here in Philadelphia in 11 years versus the Atlanta Braves. The Braves are starting Strider. Kid hasn't pitched since the second week, September 18th-ish, 16th, 17th of September. They say maybe 2-3 innings. Kid's got some gas. He's got some stuff. He's obviously better than Charlie Morton is. Went today. I don't know if you can see. I got a little trim and stuff like that. Let's grow more. Coming up No Shave November. And Atlanta Braves fan comes in. He sits down and was like, "What's going on, man?" So kind of gave him the eye. I was like, good luck tonight, man. He's like, yeah. That's right. It's rough being a Braves fan around here. And he was like, it's all right. It's all right. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see how that happens, later on. But one final parting word before we get out of here. Major League Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher Bruce Sutter from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Great stuff out there. The Amish, they have this amazing buffet right off like the turnpike. It's got like everything fresh, homemade, everything fresh baked. We actually, as like kids and teenagers, we would get together and we'd be like, all right, listen, this Friday we don't have school. Just gonna load up. We're gonna go. We just get out there like 9:30. Yeah, that's it. Miller Smorgasbord, baby. Great word, smorgasbord, man. And dude, we would load up. They've got these buns, sticky bun things. Oh my god, it's people are like, where do you want your last meal to be? What would you have? It's like, I'm gonna go there. Give me the Millers, man. Like it's wonderful. If you ever in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, you need to go and check it out. Bruce Sutter, Hall of Fame pitcher, 69 years old, very young. Fun fact: he's the only pitcher elected to the Hall of Fame, the first pitcher elected to the Hall of Fame who never started a game. So he was one of sports' most dominant relievers, 70s, 80s. Yeah, totally, decent guy, and long overdue when he was elected into the Hall of Fame. Like, there's always that, question, like, you put a reliever in, don't put a reliever in. But six-time All-Star, World Series champion, 1982, won the Cy Young. Hall of Fame, retired for the Cardinals. Cubs Hall of Fame, number 42, retired by the Cardinals. Got in on his 13th and final ballot. Induction year of 2006 with 76.9% of the vote, which you only need 75%. So much due, much love. Rest in peace, Suter. It's funny, right? Because a lot of these guys now that I grew up watching, they're like getting into the twilights, with their lives. And it's like, I've always said, I use sports, as sort of like the closest medium for myself to kind of gauge like where I'm at. Like, it's so odd to know that, a lot of these guys that are playing in the four major sports right now, they were born, in and around the year 2000, plus or minus a couple of years. And it's like, holy shit. And by 2000, I was already set out, all my life doing my thing. And story for another day. But again, thank you, Uncle Rico, for joining the program. Brian Wagner always being there. Trevor Harris jumping in, listening on your drive. Hopefully things are getting better down there where you're at. And Mr. Robbins, thank you for the conversation, sir. I'll be reaching out to you. And if you watch this again, please, if I don't hear from you, you don't hear from me. Let's get it together. And yeah, really good stuff. All right, guys, enjoy the baseball games and enjoy your evening. Take care.